You're listening to the Crowdfunding Nerds Podcast, a podcast that will help you succeed before, during, and after your crowdfunding event. And now, here is your host, Andrew Lowen.
Hey everybody, welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined as always by Rick and Sexy Irish Sean. How are you guys doing?
It's awesome.
Very cool. So GameFound is in this stage of accepting certain products or projects based on, probably cherry picking from the cream of the crop, trying to entice creators with big properties to put games on their platform. And it sounds like they're doing a pretty good job. I'm sure that they have more lined up that I just haven't seen. But Kingdom Rush, which is a pretty popular game and it has popular Kickstarter following, is coming to GameFound, which I'm kind of excited about. I think I'll probably end up backing that one this time. I did not back the first two. That's something to look forward to. Also, Fallen Land is doing pretty well. Over $120,000 or something at the time of this recording. And then we have Cryptid Cafe that's hitting Kickstarter. So hopeful for that. But what about you guys?
Yeah, so Cryptid Cafe is live at the moment. And the art for that game is looking phenomenal. It's been crushing it on ads. We've been helping with that. And it looks like a really exciting project. So definitely go check that out. We'll leave a link in the description for you to look at it. And it's this kind of quirky game where you are a Sasquatch and you're serving these other monsters, these, delicious, horrible food.
Yeah. I actually think this game is really interesting because it seems to be a little wave of cryptid games coming to Kickstarter. I'm really excited for this particular creator. Chip Cole is the name of the creator. Pushed him to put more into his advertising because it just seems like his ads are so effective that they just merit a greater investment, which is interesting because that's going to tie into our topic today, which is how to know if your Facebook ads are working for Kickstarter. That is a question that I think everybody should be well informed, especially if you're going to hire somebody, but even if you're doing ads on your own, you need to know if they're working. In this particular example, I actually gave the recommendation to our client that they should spend more money on their pre-Kickstarter marketing because I believe that it's working very well and they're going to get rewarded for it. And during this podcast, we're going to kind of break down how to know if your ads are working. It would be nice to have the information that you would have if you had traditional e-commerce, which was, I spent $100 on the ads, I made $300 in sales or whatever. But with Kickstarter, you only figure out how much you made, number one, after your project goes live. And then number two, you can tie that to your various marketing initiatives after you finish your project, because that's when you get the email list and you can compare where your pre-launch emails came from. Long ago, I was once a semi-professional poker player, and I find that various types of poker playing, we'll call them personalities. You have some people who are more risk averse, and then some people who play more loose and fast. And it's possible to win with both styles of play. If you play really tight, you only play, let's say, the best hands. You're not going to bluff as much and that sort of thing. Or you could play loose and fast, where you play a lot of hands, you want to see a lot of pots, and then you want, maybe you end up landing something big and people bet into you because they think you're lying. There are ways to win with both styles, but I find the same is true with someone going to Kickstarter. They have a certain level of risk that they're willing to tolerate, and different personalities will have different levels that they're willing to tolerate. So if you are risk averse, you're going to be more concerned with wanting to know that your ads are working than if you are, let's say, that more risky, willing to risk more. You're going to play faster and looser. The information that we're going to discuss might not be as important to you based on that personality, but it should be. It is very easy to sink your money into a big black hole that is called marketing or paid promotion and not see a return.
One thing that comes to mind is the art of war. It's an ancient Chinese document about warfare, but a lot of the principles are just based on observation and logic, and it's a very helpful book to read when thinking about marketing even. What you're saying there about these different styles of personalities, well, the same thing happens in warfare. You have military tactics that are very aggressive, and then you have military tactics that are very reserved. I think the approach is actually to know when to apply both of those styles. I think that's where you're going to get the best results. You need to know where do you need to put your energies and resources into your campaign, where you're going to see the greatest return, the greatest yield. If you're stressed about something that isn't that big of a deal, and you're putting a lot of emphasis on that one thing that isn't really going to move the needle on your campaign, your energies are probably best spent somewhere else. So knowing where to put your energies and your forces is very important. And it's why people hire people like us, so that they don't have to think about the marketing. They can focus on what they're good at. And, maybe that's building links with their community and answering their questions, or, working on the underbelly of all the manufacturing things. So that's one reason people hire marketing people, is to just clear their mind and to focus on the things that they're good at.
With all types of marketing, you'll have the people that hire oftentimes hire because they know that there's value in it, but they can't extract the value themselves, or they don't know how to extract the value. And what I find that it kind of boils down to is that they're not sure that, they do an activity that is actually a result producing activity, but they don't understand how to measure the success of that activity. So they lose heart very quickly, and they kind of let it fall off, the wheels fall off, because they're not sure how to measure if something's working. Let's frame the conversation a little bit about what a lead is. When we run ads on Facebook or anywhere else, any kind of paid promotion, you need to kind of boil down your results to it ends up boiling down to a lead. And so a lead is a different thing at different times in a Kickstarter campaign, right? I mean, pre-launch versus during the Kickstarter versus your post-campaign pledge manager, things that are valuable kind of change. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I suppose in your pre-marketing, your lead is defined by someone who joins your community. So this is someone who joins your email list, and we set up a system in place where by joining your email list, they get an automated email response as soon as they join that says, hey, join our community on Facebook or Discord or Reddit or wherever your community is. And that way they get integrated into your sphere of influence, and they can basically join the party and chat with other people. So that's very valuable, because you're trying to build up hype and sort of tease out your game and your Kickstarter project, so that by the time your Kickstarter launches, everyone's warmed up and ready to go. Yeah, and then I suppose then you have your actual campaign, and this is marked by someone who backs. When your Kickstarter project is live, we use ads to direct traffic to that page, the actual live page, in hopes that they will back, and that's how we measure a lead in that case. Now that's a bit more tricky to discern. We do use Google Analytics to help us, piece that together. But that's how we try to find a lead during the actual launch of your campaign, is someone who actually backs.
And emails aren't really as useful during this phase, are they? If the goal was to gather emails while your Kickstarter campaign was live, you're kind of missing the point. A lot of the time, people wonder, should I still send people to my landing page even though my Kickstarter campaign's live? Let's say like with traffic, Facebook traffic. And I always recommend sending traffic directly to the Kickstarter landing page, because, where they can back the game, because in essence, it's one less click. They're going to learn about the product, and they're going to have the ability to take action right there. Whereas if they were on your landing page and they were learning about the product, the action that you are asking of them is to, of course, you're going to say back the Kickstarter or check out the Kickstarter, but really the call to action is to click to go to the Kickstarter page. Whereas on the Kickstarter page itself is actually to back the game. Someone who backs your game is a much more valuable lead than someone who signs up for more information, right? So that's why we focus on backers during Kickstarter.
Yeah,
Sounds obvious.
and they're also excited about the project, and the actual landing page of your Kickstarter project has all the information that they need. They don't need to go through some type of email funnel and on your Facebook group to find out about your game, because it's all there. They can take the action, and whilst they're excited about the project, or at least intrigued about it, gives them the ability to as you said, to back the project with the least amount of friction possible. So that's why we do that. But could you maybe explain then some of the difficulties of actually defining the success of those leads? Because we know through Facebook ads how many people can click on a link to go to the page, but knowing how many of those people actually convert and actually back the project, that becomes a bit more difficult to work out.
Right. It's not an exact science when you send somebody from a Facebook ad to a Kickstarter page, because Kickstarter does not allow us to measure with the Facebook pixel. This is pretty much exclusively on Kickstarter. I know GameFound does allow the use of the Facebook pixel. Facebook pixel tracks the results of Facebook or of traffic from the Facebook platform, so Facebook, Instagram. And when you can't track when, somebody clicking from Facebook and, that eventually maybe leads to a backer on Kickstarter, you just lose the ability to connect the two. And so what Kickstarter does instead is it gives you, actually, we talked about all of these referral metrics, and you can see where somebody came from. We've talked about that in a previous podcast. Would definitely encourage you to check that one out. It's, I believe, our first one that we ever recorded here. And that kind of turns into a fuzzy science. There are many, many backers that are going to come in through a method called direct, as an example, where Kickstarter doesn't know exactly where they came from and therefore attributes them to this kind of nebulous, we'll call it a miscellaneous category called direct traffic, or it's where it's generally unknown where they came from. You're going to have a bunch of them, but I mean, they could have come from Facebook ads. Chances are they're coming from everywhere. But because we can't pinpoint exactly where they came from, we have to estimate. And so we use other tools during the Kickstarter to get a sense of how effective the campaigns are that we're running. But my favorite, as far as tracking, is really after the Kickstarter is over, and when you use a pledge manager, all the major pledge managers that we work with accept Facebook Pixel, and so we're able to see how many people come in and how many people buy that came in via Facebook. It's kind of cool, which I guess this post Kickstarter segment, is in the pledge manager, the desirable action is a sale, making a sale. So we kind of went through pre, during, and post Kickstarter, and the customer's mindset is different in each of those phases. So pre-launch, I guess you want to spread information about your game. So you want people to absorb information, rather. You want to find people that would be interested in your game, using Facebook's ad manager, and then you bring them to your landing page to absorb information. So it's not necessarily about getting the email sign up. A lot of people miss that. People will use Facebook lead ads, and I mean, if we did that, we would look like heroes. We would get leads for under $1 constantly, because it's just so easy to, you show an ad and they opt into information right on Facebook. They can just hit a button that sends you their email that they already have on file with Facebook. It's a single button. They don't even need to type anything with their keyboard. However, that misses the point of this phase, which is to get them to absorb information. So you'll get their email. It might not even be the right email that they actually check. To most people, notifications from Facebook are kind of spammy. So I don't know about you guys, but I definitely do not use my primary emails that I check for my Facebook account.
No, I don't either, and I think that's a very common thing as well. So you probably find a lot of people would never see those emails from you.
Right. And, sadly, the results with lead specific Facebook ads are like less than 1% will convert. So we're aiming for over 10% conversion. So that doesn't work. What does work, though, is when you get somebody to absorb information about your product during this pre-launch phase, they volunteer their own information because a customer's email address has value to them. But they will willingly exchange that for something of greater value. And if we can get someone to absorb information about your product, about your game, then they're going to be really interested in it, and they're going to see the value in your game, and they're going to gladly give you their email. So if we can give them a great landing page experience in this pre-launch marketing phase, a visitor is going to be much more likely to give you their email after they have a chance to learn about the game. Various tools we use. Obviously you need to build a landing page. We use MailChimp to send emails, which about 2/3 of the email marketing world uses MailChimp at this point. We track what's working through Facebook, Pixel, and Google Analytics. I mean, there are some common benchmarks that we would use to measure the effectiveness of something like this. You want to go into those benchmarks, Sean?
Yeah. So one of the things is we want to see the open rate of your MailChimp email. So once your landing page is getting leads and you're sending out a monthly email, we want to very closely monitor how many people are opening that email and how many people they're not taking action in those email by clicking a link to find out more information within those emails, because that is a sign that those people are ready to go. Those people are interested in the project or still interested in the project. Another thing we track is also the geological location. So I might be inclined to change a demographic or put more budget into a certain geological demographic if I see a lot of people in Canada, for example, are opening this email. It's like, okay, there's a lot of people in Canada that seem to resonate with this game, so let's see if we can maybe spend a bit more on our budget in that area. So you can learn some interesting things just from MailChimp, and that's one reason why we would recommend that people use that.
Absolutely. And so the open rate means that somebody opened your email and they theoretically read through it. Most of the time people will scan through an email, so it needs to be scannable. You need to break, have headlines and images and certain text that you think is very important should be bold. Your calls to action should be colorful buttons and that kind of thing, so that people's eyes are drawn there. But the open rate matters more than the click-through rate. For the most part, when you send emails out, unless you're aiming to get people to follow your Kickstarter's pre-launch page or some other very specific call to action like that, where you want people to click so that they do something else that's desirable, the most important thing is that they, again, absorb information. The whole purpose of sending a monthly newsletter about your product is to get people to absorb information. Now, when it comes time for the Kickstarter campaign, when you launch live, you're going to send an email out that says, here's our Kickstarter campaign, and go. We get people to absorb more information about your product. They're going to be more likely to back your product.
Yeah, I think Full and Land's a prime example, because they had, I think on average, about 30 to 40% open rate on their emails. In fact, We're Live Now email had a 40% open rate, and it had a humongous click-through rate as well. And they funded in 4 hours. So I think you could definitely attribute that to that email that was sent.
So, another common benchmark that we use for pre-launch, in the pre-launch phase that's very important is the number of people that visit your landing page compared to the percentage that actually sign up for your notifications, like typically give you their email address for that. That's important because the more effective a landing page is, the higher a conversion rate it's going to have. We aim for a conversion rate of 10%. So when let's say 10 people visit your website, one on average should be signing up for your emails. It can be higher than that. I've had, just depending on, maybe you break into a pocket of people that are super excited about your game, it's going to be higher. Maybe you could have certain pockets that aren't as excited, and that would be lower. But the average should be about 10% of the people should convert. I mean, that number is super important. What I've learned to do is I've learned to use that benchmark to judge the effectiveness of a landing page. So, sometimes everyone has their own tastes, and I look at a landing page and sometimes I'm like, that's awesome, or this is terrible. And somebody says, well, I want to use it anyway. And we do. So if it gets great conversion, then I stand corrected. And I have indeed been corrected in the past. In the end, I'm all about the data. And that is a very important benchmark for the success of a pre-launch marketing campaign. If you have something like 7 or 8% conversion, there are absolutely things that you can do to improve the effectiveness of your landing page. And we typically recommend like 3 months of time for a pre-launch phase. And this is not only for, reviewers like 3 months, but also we like 3 months because in the first month we build the landing page, and in the next 2 months we actually market on Facebook. So as far as time, the benchmark is 3 months. I'll also add that for, another common benchmark that I use for pre-launch with Facebook ads is a 20-cent click. So if it costs 20 cents per click, then anything below that, I consider that good. And then anything above that, I consider that in the pre-launch phase that you can optimize a little bit more. So that's another benchmark that I think is pretty important there. During the Kickstarter, I actually use KickTrack a lot during a Kickstarter campaign. The ability to measure how many people are backing your game is relatively limited, although we do use Google Analytics. We try to measure the conversions in e-commerce, the e-commerce reports of Google Analytics. It's far from perfect, but it's something that we can use. And then also the bounce rate of various audiences that we pull in via Kickstarter. You can use something called UTM codes to monitor how your various audiences are doing. You can actually see how your audiences are responding to your Kickstarter page. And the short version is that bounce rates are what happens when somebody visits a landing page for the first time. Do they click through to another page, or do they hit the back button on their browser or close their browser window if they only looked at your initial page and then left? That's called a bounce. And on a normal website, you can expect, an average of like 30 to 50% of the people that go to your website will bounce for one reason or another. But on Kickstarter, it's actually much higher. So I would say anywhere from 70 to 90% of the people that go to that Kickstarter page are going to bounce, because, the only place you can go on Kickstarter, aside from other Kickstarter pages, where they left yours, is deeper in. So they can either back your campaign and they'll see multiple pages that way, or they can look at various tabs, which can count as additional pages. But most often, they're just going to be scrolling the length of your Kickstarter page, deciding if they want to back this or not. They might bookmark it, but if they leave without, venturing further in, actually clicking something that loads another page, it's going to look like a bounce. So it's going to look much higher. So basically what I do for bounce rates, I will look, and anything under 85% bounce rate is decent. The best bounce rates I've been able to find are about 70%. So 7 out of the 10 people leaving, and then 3 out of the 10 people doing something desirable, absorbing information or whatever it is. That's a fantastic number. Another thing, of course, are your daily backers. So the number of backers that you get each day, it's kind of interesting because in the middle of the campaign, you get like an average daily number that's pretty consistent. Fallen Land right now is getting like 31 backers a day on average or so. And the amount of funding that they're raising each day is different, but the number of backers is consistent. And so that's something that I'll look at. If we raise the budget in, let's say, Facebook ads, I would expect to see more backers. Our average backer number should increase. So that's another kind of correlation. It doesn't imply this is why more backers are joining, but it really helps that information. So your KickTrack page is really useful. I look at the daily data for all of our clients. That's something that I check out all the time. And then, of course, the last benchmark for during the Kickstarter is going to be the actual cost per click. Should be around anywhere from 20 to 40 cents is what I would consider okay. If it's 40 cents per click, but it has a great, maybe there's a good bounce rate, then I would consider that more valuable than something that's like 10 cents but has a 95% bounce rate, of course.
So then let's talk about the pledge manager part of your campaigns. It's post Kickstarter launch. What are the metrics that you're looking at to determine success?
Really, it comes down to the number of sales you make. The number of people who click, getting that number to be as cheap as possible and getting your sales to be as high as possible. That's the whole name of the game. So you definitely want to look at the cost per sale. So your two metrics that are very important on this at this phase are your return on ad spend, called ROAS, return on ad spend. And that's a little ratio that for every dollar in ads that you spend, how much do you make back in sales? So if you make $4 to every $1 that you spend, you're going to have a 4.0 return on ad spend. And of course, the other thing is the amount that people spend. You just want to make sure that you're making more money than you're spending. You've got various conversion rates that you can look at. If it costs a certain dollar amount to convert someone, that's pretty important too. If you have a $20 game versus a $100 game, it's, the actual dollar amount that you spend in order to get somebody to convert is really going to matter. You need to make sure you're profitable at that point. If you're profitable, then, let's say it costs you on average for a $20 game, let's say it costs you $8 to bring into your fulfillment center. So you're going to make, in theory, $12 when you make a sale. Well, you have to factor in how much you're spending on marketing, because that's taken directly out of that $12, including, of course, if you've hired us, we have a marketing fee that you're going to need to subtract as well. So,
and then tax.
Yeah, that's right. So you need to make sure that whatever you're spending is profitable for you. That's really like the post-campaign situation.
And we've seen some of our clients really blow up at this stage of their campaigns. Verge Games with their Christmas Carol. How did they do on Kickstarter compared to how they did on their Pledge Manager?
They actually made about twice as much money during their Pledge Manager than they did during their Kickstarter campaign, just year over year, because people could get it right away. We didn't have to market only to people that knew Kickstarter. We got to market to everyone. And of course, there were a bunch of people that said, oh, I ran this last year, because they had a PDF download, and they had a bunch of social proof that way. So they had a bunch of positive feedback that they got to leverage. So they did a whole lot better during their post-campaign.
Rick, do you have anything you want to add before we switch gears?
That's a negative. This topic is beyond me.
Mm-hmm. Sound like Gandalf from, this enemy is above you or is beyond you.
Yeah.
Because talking about the Balrog.
Yeah.
Over my head. OMH.
Yeah, let's talk about common markers to identify the effectiveness of your ad.
One thing that's important to recognize is that we're trying to reduce the possibility of failure. We are dealing in the realms of probabilities. So we want to try and do the math to try and work out, are we setting ourselves up for success or for failure? So if we just use some assumptions, so as we start getting leads, if we just take the assumption, well, we expect for all our leads that 10% are going to convert on Kickstarter on the day of launch. That means 10% of the people in our entire mailing list are going to actually back. And obviously that could be more than that, it could be less than that, but that's sort of an average that we're going to assume. And then we say, well, out of those 10 people, how much money will we make? And then you can assume, oh, we will make about this amount of money. Oh, and if we made that amount of money, would we succeed in our funding goal, or would we fail? And then that sort of gives you a bit of a benchmark to sort of cushion the probability of failure. So you can say, well, we need about another 200 leads before we're confident that we can go to Kickstarter. So if you just do a bit of the math, that can help you. Another thing is you could also factor in the ratio that we tried to work out, which was that on average, and we think we did a pretty good job of examining a bunch of different Kickstarters for this, but on average, if you bring in 6 backers, Kickstarter is going to find 4. So if you work under that assumption, you can sort of play with the numbers in that space as well, and you can sort of work out a little bit, well, if we get so many backers, Kickstarter will probably help us find some as well, and we can factor some of those into this math to work out how many leads we need to acquire. And it's up to you about how conservative or how liberal you want to be with those estimates, but it's still important that you sort of have a rough idea of where you're going and how much you actually need for success.
About the ratio of people that you will bring versus the people that Kickstarter will bring, generally what we observed was that if our clients brought in 6 backers, Kickstarter would bring in 4. And of course, we used averages. We attributed a ton of different referral metrics to either entirely in the creator's hand, entirely in Kickstarter's hand, or exactly even. So we came up with this ratio of basically 60-40. You bring 60%, Kickstarter brings 40%, and that's not necessarily a hard and fast rule to use everywhere in all cases, but it is a good idea to keep in mind. So what I've always used is if we can bring in 60% of the amount of backers that you need to fund on the first day, then we've just been seeing that our clients get funded. So if we build the email list, let's say, we're using that 10% benchmark. If a client of sign up to conversion. So if a client needs 300 and let's just say keep it simple. We'll say 300 backers to fund. Then we need to bring in 60% of that on the first day ourselves, which means we need to bring 180 backers. Now, if we're going by that standard 10% conversion rate from an email list, and again, assuming the email list is the only factor right now, and the email that you send out is the only thing that people are going to look at, we need 1,800 people to get 180 backers on the first day. Now, one other thing in relation to doing the math, really we're talking about gathering emails, gathering interest for your pre-launch and all that. There's this concept called opportunity cost that I wanted to mention. There is a cost to every opportunity, and that cost is the other thing you could have done instead. So everybody has a limited budget that they bring with them, whether it's 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000. Your budget is limited. So you have to choose where to invest that money. If you invest it, let's say in a marketing company like ours, then you cannot invest that money somewhere else. We talked to somebody earlier today where it was going to cost them like $1,900 to use our services. And that is honestly, it's $1,900 that they could spend on Facebook ads if they simply just didn't pay us. It's legitimately something to consider. Are we going to do a better job than if you just did a little bit worse and had $1,900 more to try to throw at the wall to, be effective? So the opportunity cost of marketing on, if you have, let's say $1,000 to spend that on Facebook, your cost is that you cannot spend that on Board Game Geek or YouTube ads or that kind of thing. And so you really need to count the cost before you invest your money.
I think it's important to think as well that even if you break even, your ads are still successful, because even if you didn't make money through your ad spend and you're able to work out, okay, well, we invested all this money in Facebook ads, and after our campaign, we worked out that we didn't make any money through our Facebook ads. It was still worth doing because through those Facebook ads, you developed a following, you got people to embrace your brand, you got people who are able to invest in something that you have created, that who are going to be delighted by your product, who are then going to tell their friends about you, who are far more likely to purchase from you again. So you have all these sort of expanded privileges that you can't really put your finger on. You can't really say, well, like hard data, this is what's going to happen. But all those things are very beneficial to you as a business owner. So even by breaking even with your ads, they're still worth doing if you think about the lifetime value that a customer can bring to your business and how they can basically become a long-time follower of everything you do. And that obviously has a snowball effect.
I think that's the main thing, that multiplier, that snowball. Using Fallen Land as a recent example, because we just launched on Kickstarter a week ago, our whole goal, they had like a $40,000 funding goal. And our whole goal was to make sure that Fallen Land funded on the first day. And so all of our pre-marketing spend, all of the time, the emails, everything like that we structured was to simply fund on that day. And we did not save any extra money for other days. I mean, we saved a little bit, we planned a little bit for launch day, but we literally used the entire budget that they had for pre-marketing and, of course, pre-marketing and also including the launch day. And our whole goal was to raise $40,000 as quickly as possible. I think it's $42,000. And we managed to help them fund in 4 hours. And now, just over a week later, they're at I'm looking at the page right now, $116,627. So the whole reason that you want to use Kickstarter is because there's a snowball effect that happens. It's not like these people are backing a few at a time, depending on, over a period of weeks. They're all backing right away. And that is so important to really get that snowball effect. Again, the whole reason we use Kickstarter is to get that snowball effect. It's a marketing amplifier. And so if we have a well-placed throw, if you have a well-placed throw of a snowball and it starts rolling down a hill with immediate momentum, then it can quickly grow and become
an avalanche.
Much more than you. That's right. So at the moment, they're avalanching at about 277% funded with 2 weeks left. And again, the whole goal was to hit $40,000 as quickly as possible, because that shows that, hey, this campaign's a winner. It's interesting and you should check it out. A lot of other people like it, and you should too, right? And so that's something that I think is probably just core to our philosophy as a company. We're not talking so much about return on investment. We're talking about an investment that in a great scenario will actually break even early on. And then, of course, on the back end is going just through the amplification enabled by a quick funding is going to pay dividends. So,
and most board game creators that we talk to, they have plans for multiple projects. So again, that snowball effect continues to your next project, because then you have all of these people who've backed your previous project that you can now update them and say, hey, we got a new game you want to check out. And they have so much social proof because they know that you can deliver a product. And that's very, very helpful for, Kickstarter, where I think consumers are afraid of backing projects that might never come to life.
Yeah, you always have that hurdle to jump over as a first-time creator, is that can you actually deliver? And I find that backers, they're a little bit cynical, but they generally want to see you succeed. And so they're going to look for indicators that will show you're likely to succeed. That successfully delivered one project really solves a lot of challenges. Whenever somebody asks, how will I know you succeed? Your backers will actually go to war for you and answer that question. They'll say, oh, well, they delivered this other game, and it's like, well, what more proof do you want, kind of thing. But yeah, you're right. Before it's tough, you're going to have a little bit of a stunted growth because, on even Awaken Realms, their first project, I think it made like 2.3 million. But I'm sure that if they launched that exact project today, they would at least, add another million to the funding goal, because they've proven that they can deliver. Of course, they have a much larger audience now, but the point still stands. You've got your follower count listed on your pre-Kickstarter landing page. What percentage of these followers are going to convert on launch? And while I've talked to a lot of other very smart Kickstarter marketers, there's no solid consensus, but I have noticed ranges. And this depends actually upon the project. Early on, and I'm talking about on the very first day that you launch, you should, of course, have a following built up on that Kickstarter landing page. Let's say you have 200 or 2,000 or whatever followers, right? A certain percentage of those people are going to convert. And what I find is that if the offer is, so we talked about the offer in a previous podcast. Totally encourage you guys to go listen to that. But if your offer is negative, let's say if it shocks your followers in a negative way, and there's poorer than normal reception of your project, you should have a number of between 5 to 9% conversion rate of those followers on launch day. I've seen this in several scenarios. One of them actually, off the top of my head, it's a little bit of a success story, was the board game design kit by Gabe Barrett. He had a much lower conversion rate than he thought. He thought he would make at least double the amount that he ended up making on his first day. He thought he'd make like 30K and he ended up making like 15. And he had a really low conversion rate. Turns out that the people following, for whatever reason, maybe they the common feel was that they had they already had a lot of these components that came in the game design kit. And so it ended up, that a lot of people who were interested in the project ended up not backing. And that was quite discouraging for Gabe. He was wondering, maybe I should cancel, maybe I should, reformulate my offer and that kind of thing. And we ended up, as the first project we worked on together, we ended up, continuing, and he raised a substantial amount of money, over the following week. So he ended up at like over $70,000 raised. What I find is a typical conversion rate for project followers actually ranges in between 10 to 15%. Actually it's usually a little higher. It's like 12 to 18%. The project followers are going to be like your more dedicated hardcore people that are also on your email list. And, they're not mutually exclusive. You're going to have a lot of people on your followers that are also in your email list. And so, you're going to have some of these followers are going to get hit from multiple angles when you launch. You're going to have your, Kickstarter notifications going out. Your email from MailChimp is going out. Maybe a message in your Facebook group is going out. And your project followers should probably be at all of those places. I find it's really anywhere from like 20 to 25% of your followers are going to convert. I've seen as high as 30. I think that's an outlier. I think that, maybe if 12 to 18% is like the normal range, then, 19 to 25% is what I would consider a high conversion rate. Your conversion rate for project followers is something you can find on your Kickstarter back end. It's a number that I think matters. It matters especially for, after your Kickstarter campaign goes live, and you get the backers that you get on the first day. It's a number that will grow over, every single day it will grow. And you'll see the conversion rate drop because your project followers compared to the number of converted followers, that ratio is going to kind of increase faster than the number of conversions. But then in kind of the final, or really it's like the final 72 hours, you're going to get that push notification at your final 48 hours that, to all of your project followers, that, hey, this project is ending soon and that kind of thing. And your conversion rate will increase a lot at that point. But your project followers are going to increase faster than your backers, or faster than they're going to convert. I figure that's a pretty useful stat to keep in mind, just based on observation. Again, I'm probably about 30 Kickstarters in at this point, but that's from my experience just trying to understand all the metrics that I can. So if that's you looking at your follower count, then I hope you hit that magic 25%. But, some campaigns that do really well, 23% is a number I've seen several times on the first day.
But I'd like to apologize to our fellow listeners. I'm sorry, my computer decided to die in the middle of the podcast, and it hasn't recovered. So I'm sitting here on a really awesome little Chromebook recording live to you.
On behalf of all our listeners, we forgive you.
And that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more information about this podcast, this episode, and anything else that we've been doing, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a question, feel free to drop us a line at crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And thank you very much for listening this week, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Over now.
Come back.
Catch you guys later.